A bomb blast killed at least 63 and injured close to 200 others in a suicide bombing at a Kabul wedding over the weekend. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari joins me once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, the Islamic State groups are not letting up in Afghanistan.
No, and it should come as no surprise when we heard that ISIS uh, took responsibility for this horrific suicide bombing. We've talked about this before on the show about how the suicide bombings in Afghanistan, more than anywhere else, as of late, when we hear these stories, are really targeting very vulnerable civilians. So schools and coffee shops and outside of very residential areas. And here we had a wedding over the weekend where there were many casualties, many injured. And of course, the Islamic State took responsibility. Coincidentally, over the last week or 2 weeks or so, there have been so many reports coming out here in the United States, more than anywhere else I've seen, warning against a resurgence of ISIS and nowhere else but Afghanistan, uh, meaning that there is or was a feeling that they're up to something, that they were brewing something, that they were planning on launching an attack of this caliber to get the attention of whether it's the West or the Afghanis, or to take advantage of a very volatile political situation or a vulnerable situation. And again, remember, this is against the backdrop of Donald Trump and the West wanting to create stability inside Afghanistan and to sit down with the Taliban to not only talk about a temporary ceasefire, but to talk about a future for that country. This is not a good sign of what the future of that country is on its way to becoming. And if the Islamic State is being diminished in Iraq and Syria, we've talked about this. It's like a whack-a-mole situation. You knock them out in one place, they will grow elsewhere because their desires are still there to grow an Islamic State, to grow their influence, and to launch these types of horrific attacks.
So why hasn't the Afghan government and the military got more of a hold of a lot of these Islamic State pockets?
Yeah, that's a great question. You can ask the same thing about what had happened in Iraq and Syria that led the way to uh, ISIS having the chance to grow the way that it did. And the answer to that is because these places are, they're patchy, they are tribal, they are already in a vulnerable place where they do not have control over all their areas, over all their provinces, over all their people. You have a group, let's say, like the Muslim Brotherhood that goes into places, or Hamas that goes into places and puts up a soup kitchen or a madrasa or anywhere where people can get some paycheck or some bit of food, and you have some constituency already. And with ISIS, we know they don't even need a constituency. They put a gun to your head, and that's it. You have a choice. You're either with us or you're dead. And I imagine that that's exactly what's going on in Afghanistan. That vulnerability, that political volatility, has led the way for insurgencies like the Taliban and now the Islamic State to grow. Now the question will be, what will be the rivalry between these groups inside places where they're vying for influence? So we saw the same thing happen in Syria and in Iraq and elsewhere, where they one group outshines the other, and usually it's the Islamic State. They are well organized, well funded, and it's a professional terrorist organization. As crazy as that sounds, on the flip side, they also have a do-it-yourself arm of the organization where they encourage people to go out and launch these attacks by just ramming their car into a couple of people, or setting off a rice cooker and killing a handful of people. So it doesn't have to be a large-scale attack to be something that's approved by the higher ups in ISIS. It's something that anyone can do, and that's what they encourage. We saw all over Europe, also in the United States. We've seen so many of these, thankfully, foiled types of attacks where people want to do, low scale. But the videos are up on YouTube and they're up on social media, how to do it yourself with items that are just laying around the house: a kitchen knife, a rice cooker, your car, etc.
Various business economists say some of Donald Trump's policies are causing a slowdown in the American economy, and the country could slip into a recession as early as 2021. Trump, Lisa, dismissed the concerns. Should Americans be worried?
You know, there's conflicting reports. Our economy is doing very well. It's what many call a Goldilocks economy. The wages are good. Interest rates are low. The stock market, I mean, is playing a little bit of a dance, but remained high for a while, and the speculation is one of many. The speculation goes like this: we're due for a recession because the economy has been doing so well. There are some signs as to the slowdown of the stock market, and we're dealing with China and North Korea and Iran, but mostly that the uncertainty that we have from China because of the economy, because of the imports, because of that uncertainty is what is leading many people to believe that we are due for a recession. Also, it's worth mentioning that we're also coming up on a presidential election here in the United States. So we know that Donald Trump, who is the economy president, will work to keep that economy beefed up because that is, his shining jewel is how he handles the economy. Not so much how he's been handling China, but we'll get to that as well. But he will do what it takes to keep the economy afloat. Now, the media, on the other hand, might not give him a fair chance to at least, defend himself. That's what we saw this morning. All of the headlines were saying that he swears up and down. The White House is saying, no, don't worry about a recession. So, he's defending that there won't be one, which is unfair because we don't really have a crystal ball right now. But I think that he will do what he can to keep the economy afloat. And his opponents and the Democrat candidates will obviously use this talking point to their benefit and say, we're headed for a recession, we're headed for a recession. Well, those scare tactics aren't going to help the economy by any means. And as I said, the uncertainty leads to the stock market dropping and being so up and down each day. But this country is very funny when you watch the news cycle during an election. It's a lot of fake news, a lot of exaggerations, and a lot of partisan politics. So we'll have to watch out for that as well.
U.S. President Trump says he's talking trade with China, but the two countries are not ready for a deal just yet.
No, both sides are, flexing the muscles and saying we have the upper hand, but it looks like they're not ready to sit down once or for a final talk. I think that's what we're headed for. We've had many talks. According to Donald Trump, he said in a press conference not too long ago that they agreed, and then the Chinese government kind of backed out on what they had agreed on. So he doesn't want to really give too much credence to a government body that will go back on their word. That's what Donald Trump really sticks to is that handshake or that deal or, really sticking to what they agreed to. Look, China is not in a position to be calling the shots. I mean, they have their own things to deal with. Obviously, they rely on this robust economy and the opportunities that they're given in global trade by the United States. They're also dealing with Hong Kong. They're dealing with Taiwan. They're dealing with places that or countries in the region that are onto them, so to speak, that are looking to pressure them in any way that they can. And this economic pressure from the United States in the form of tariffs is not helping the situation. So I do believe that the U.S. has the upper hand, but will China back down? Will they come to the negotiating table again? That is what we're waiting to see.
Now, speaking of China, some government officials are worried about China's growing arsenal of accurate long-range missiles, since many pose a major threat to almost all North American bases, airstrips, and military installations, Lisa.
Yes, so China has been very, very astute at keeping themselves relevant and militarily relevant as well. They make it very known that they are working on their cyber program, on their missile program. They are beefing up their military. Again, more of this flexing of the muscles. It's not just on the economic world stage that they want to compete, but they want to say that they are keeping up with the rest of the world. And that's a wake-up call to the West. I mean, all countries in the West to say that our assets, whether they're here in the West or back east, are at the mercy of these growing militaries and growing influences that we once kind of shooed away and said, they would never reach our level of competency. But you never know. I mean, I'm not saying that the Chinese military is up to par with the United States by any means, but they know that part of the world better. And when reports are pointing to that advantage, I think it's worth listening to.
Iran is preparing for another satellite launch after failing twice earlier this year, Lisa. There are accusations the Islamic Republic is using the program to help develop ballistic missiles.
Well, where there's a will, there's a way, and we definitely know there's a will to develop a very competitive weapons program. That's why we're in this mess with the Iranian government to begin with. So yes, they failed, but they're at it again. And I think for the Iranian regime, their MO has always been to get these headlines out there. So whether it's accurate or not that they are successful, or whether or not it's accurate that they are close to having a weapon, the fact that they put the news out there that they're working towards one is very important for the Iranian regime. It's very important that they appear strong. It's very important that they appear invincible. It's very important for them to appear to be going after the parts of their nuclear program that were forbidden by the nuclear deal. Why? Because they want to make a point. They want to make a point that they're no longer signatory or no longer held within the bounds of the nuclear program because the United States pulled out over a year ago in May. And once the United States pulled out, you saw very shaky Europe with regards to staying within the deal. And let's be honest, the Iranian regime is making it very difficult when they are seizing oil tankers randomly, or downing a U.S. drone. It doesn't look too good for the Europeans even to side with them. So, more of these headlines, more of that saber rattling, more of that muscle flexing, chest thumping, whatever you want to call it. But this is the MO of the Iranian propaganda machine.
Meanwhile, in Hong Kong, 1.7 million people are defying police to march in the pouring rain. The Hong Kong immigration to Taiwan surges as protests grind on.
Yep, so this is going to get much worse. We say this every week. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And we're seeing that proven to us by the headlines coming out of Hong Kong. The people of Hong Kong have been very, very disillusioned for a long time. And now that they have the opportunity to be heard, they're not going to back down without a fair fight. When you look at the footage from the protests coming out of Hong Kong, it's very interesting to see how what a strong will they have. But at the same time, they are, for the most part, very civil and very respectful towards authorities, much more than you see in other countries. I know these headlines say that they defied police because they went into let's say a huge park where they were forbidden to go. Or for that part of the world, this is considered extremely disobedient, or that they're going against the police or doing this or doing that. But it's a big deal when you have such a reserved population go out and go in the rain, in the parks where they're not allowed to, go overnight, walk up to policemen and continue their protests. They're very disenchanted and they have an opportunity. They don't want this opportunity to be lost or to be, in vain. And I think their major issue right now is to prove to the world what they've been going through and what China is doing to them. And what better time than now when China is being pressured by the rest of the world, but particularly the United States, to make their case. And many of them, if they're not sticking around for the protests, going to Taiwan, as you said. There is about 10 to 20% of the population of Taiwan is from Hong Kong, I read, which is unbelievable. But a fun fact is that Hong Kong, obviously many people know, is very expensive. The cost of living is exorbitant. It's another New York City of the East, probably more expensive than New York City. And now they're enjoying the benefits of Taiwan. Cheaper rents, cheaper cost of living, and perhaps more opportunity for them to do good business over there. So we're seeing a reshuffling of the Far East as we've never seen before. And as I said, it might get worse before it gets better, but hopefully that it will be better in the long run for the people of that country.
North Korea's Kim Jong-un oversaw the test firing of a new weapon again. Tell me more about that.
Oh, this is very interesting. So as soon as we think that there will be some sort of better relations between the North Koreans and the United States to sit down once again to finalize a deal, to continue with the two meetings that Kim Jong-un and President Trump already had. We take one step forward and 10 steps back. And here we have again reports that he is testing weapons, and he's very proud of it. Next week, the U.S. envoy to that part of the world will be visiting South Korea, Japan, to speak with the neighbors to try to get or pressure North Korea to a meeting to finalize this. Look, as I said, we are headed towards an election, and Donald Trump hopes for a re-election. And because of that, he needs to start, crossing his list of foreign policy issues off one by one. North Korea is obviously one of them. China is obviously another one. Iran, which looks like it's the furthest from having any sort of resolution, is another. This is continuing on, and the North Koreans and the Chinese are not helping by putting out these reports about beefing up their capabilities. But the tests continue, nation building continues, and these dictators are continuing. So this is, again, that part of the world, it's competitive. And I think right now they want to show the West that they're not going to be bullied around.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Thanks, Lisa.
My pleasure.